Right, so let's crack on. So I think we did one of these webinars for the kind of Europe and US delegates, and it went down really well because lots of people are kind of interested in what's going on out there in the market at the moment, particularly in this kind of post-pandemic world that we're living in, or it's not that post at the moment, mid-pandemic world that we're living in. And yeah, I just thought it was interesting. So we did. You can access the recording if you just want to hit up John at harbourclubevents.com. He'll send you a copy of the recording from the UK one where we had a couple of people walking through deals that they'd done. But I thought it'd be really interesting to get Victor and Paul on board. So Victor is a great example of somebody that's in Singapore doing deals in Singapore. And Paul's a good example of somebody that's outside of Asia but doing deals in the region. So he's done a deal in Australia and has a few more, I think, coming in Australia, and seems to quite like doing deals down under. So we thought that might be a good sort of angle to cover off. So yeah, I thought let's I guess just start with perhaps discussing some of the deals that have already been done and lessons learned from those and what's changed kind of during the pandemic. Victor, would you like to go first?
Yeah. Well, basically, I started doing deals before doing the Harbour Club, and I did the Harbour Club 2 years ago, and that really has helped me to do more deals. The first deal I did was a WIBO, so a working buyout, and I'm just finalizing the buyout at the moment. So I would say that the pandemic has helped me, doing the buyout, because it has changed so many things in the equation that it was also a good opportunity, talking to the partner, saying, look, am I still relevant to be working here? Maybe it's the right time to for me to do an exit. And it takes a few months because of the uncertainty of the situation on being able to agree on the valuation with the current majority owner, of course, trying to not willing to put any figure on the table. So I was trying, to build on his mathematics until he started to to put the first figures on the table, and then it was able to be quite quickly. And of course, since the pandemic has started in Singapore, this is where I've been much more active in doing deals, because there is a lot of opportunities out there, and there is a lot of bad opportunities out there as well. So I guess there is a lot of people trying to sell their business that are past the recovery point, and willing also to hide many things under the carpet. So I find it like really a very interesting period. At the same time, everything needs to be a double and triple check because of this. And it's amazing, the number of things you can do in your accounts if it's 1 year to hide the reality of the situation. So I guess now that we are entering the second year, as soon as we can see also 2 years account, it will be easier to see that things have been a bit handled a bit funny in the accounts for 2020.
Yeah, what is it they say? Accountants drive only using the rear view mirror, so you only see what's happened. You don't see what's about to happen. But interesting. We'll drill in a little bit more into like how you're finding deals and stuff like that in a minute. If anyone's got any questions, by the way, you can just hit the chat. So on the bottom toolbar, there's like 3 little dots. You hit the 3 dots and you open that up, and there's a chat. Just type into the chat screen any questions that you have for either myself or Victor or Paul, and we will try and get. I normally say when we do these webinars, we'll answer every question that gets asked, but on the last one we answered about 60 of them, and we had 153 that we couldn't get to because we'd scheduled an hour and we got to 2 hours. So just something had to stop. Paul, what are you finding out there at the moment with the world at large, the pandemic, and why is Australia so appealing at the moment?
Yeah, so I think that the pandemic probably has created lots of sort of opportunities for me. I think nothing's changed just because there's a pandemic, that about a quarter of businesses in Australia, in the UK and the US are owned by the baby boomer generation. But, they're probably not big enough businesses to be on the radar of private equity. Normally private equity firms don't get out of bed for, less than 50 million. But, these business owners don't have an exit plan. So, their kids don't want it because they see how hard their parents work at the business and they don't want to buy themselves a job. Their employees probably aren't confident enough to buy the business. So that gives tons of opportunity to people like me. But I think what we've seen since the pandemic is you've got two types of business. You've got those that are absolutely flying and they've used this as an opportunity. And we've taken stakes in quite a few different businesses where we're going to help them on that growth spurt, make them bigger and better and consolidate. So actually before this webinar, I was just on a call with a business in Australia, in Canberra, which is a construction business, and the owners are looking, they understand their business just isn't quite valuable enough at the moment, but if we can go and help them join up with 2 or 3 other construction businesses and drive some cost savings and synergies, then we can then hopefully sell a group of companies for a better multiple than maybe what they might be worth today. And then I think the second type of businesses that we're seeing are those that have been pretty screwed by the pandemic, financially, and we've taken stakes in quite a few companies to help them with some financial re-engineering, get them back on track, and then they'll either buy us out or we'll help them sell a more valuable, more profitable business. And I think in Australia, I mean, I'm from the UK, I've done quite a few deals in the UK, but I think what I found with Australia is people just business owners seem to be less protective and more easygoing. And, we did a deal about 6 weeks ago on a logistics business where it's completely all seller financed. So we bought $1 million logistics business for literally paying for it over 3 years, so no money down. And again, that was an example of a 64-year-old business owner. She'd had enough, didn't want to run the business anymore, bored with it, wants to retire, and we've come along and done that sort of deal. So definitely hope to do lots more deals in Australia.
Yeah, fantastic. And in fact, one of the deals you did was a construction company in Canberra. So was that because you'd reached out to a whole bunch of construction businesses and you've just got a big pipeline in that space?
Yeah, literally, we've just gone on to the Yellow Pages equivalent in Australia and written to all the construction companies in and around Canberra. And yeah, we've got tons of conversations going on with construction companies in that area.
Yeah, fantastic. Australia does seem like an interesting place. Whenever we've, I've done a few deals there, and it does seem like there, in the UK, there's a nightmare with banks, and there's a nightmare with, selling companies of a certain size, that thing. And it seems like that problem is really exacerbated in Australia. Like they have even less of banking support and even less of a market for, for their potential sales effectively. So I think that baby boomer thing as well, I think because they've had less immigration. In the UK, we've had a lot of immigration, so there is a much bigger younger generation there that could provide some handover, not that much, but in Australia that doesn't seem to be the case. There seems to be a much bigger hole. So Victor, how have you been sourcing deals in all of your deals have been in Singapore, right?
Yeah.
And it's been about 6 or 7 now. What are you up to?
Sorry?
Yeah, it's about 6 or 7 deals you've done in Singapore now?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So as you know, everything is a bit under the radar for this kind of size. So I think the one thing that has been really working for me is to tell everyone that I'm buying companies and I'm looking for companies. So from my lawyer to my hairstylist, for instance, and it really works. Not every time, of course, but usually, I will receive a text, hey, by the way, I got someone who is interested to discuss and so on. So that has been a good way for me to source. I really believe in the fact that your next deal is already in your phone. Then I've been also business for sale, all of this, trying to source business, and I found 2. I found a spa and I found a hair salon there. So that was also a direct seller, not through a broker. I've tried brokers, again, but quite difficult to source. And I don't mind also sourcing like bigger deals and so on with brokers, but quite difficult to find a good one. But right now I have one that's I like, because I think he understood that he should push me the deals, the business where nobody is keen to take. So he knows that, okay, my last resource will be Victor, and Victor will be a bit more creative in the way he would structure the deal, which is not the interest of the broker, but at the end of the day, he still wants to do things. So yeah, trying always to go through to a direct sellers, that has been working, and then spending time, like really spending time with them. That's always the best deal. It's where I've been spending the most time with the people. And I think there is this rule of you need to do at least 10 or 20 meetings with one guy before closing the deal, which I guess is very true. And along the process, I know that Singapore is not a big market, so usually they might have 2-3 interested parties at the very beginning of the process. But I know I'm always the last one to still be in the discussion, because who wants to spend 10 meetings, 20 meetings with someone? I think many people believe that this is a quite straightforward process on a short process. From the seller point of view, they think that they will get their money within a week. And from the buyer point of view, they think that when they start to talk, they will find a deal within a week or 2 weeks, but usually it takes more time. So I think that's also, at the end of the day, it's a strength, to know that it will take time. So yeah, take the time to go through the process. And the more you spend time, the more rapport you have with the seller, and the more also trust on things you can discover within the discussion, and the better deal also you can find.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever made it to 20 meetings. That would be like a war of attrition, to grind them down. But yeah, that's quite impressive. Daniel Priestley, in one of his books, talks about the 7-hour rule, and for people to trust you enough to do the transaction, they need to have spent 7 hours with you, and that can be broken up in one marathon session, or it can be broken up into several meetings over a period of time, or a mixture of pre-recorded content and live interaction. But it's about building that rapport over a sustained period of time. And I thought that was quite an interesting observation, because you definitely notice if you dive straight into the numbers and straight into the nitty-gritty, sometimes it can really alienate them and put them off. Although Paul, you've kind of nailed the setting expectations very early on with the potential target. And how do you balance that with also keeping rapport? Because you have to, it's kind of getting straight down to business, but also, not pissing them off, I guess. How do you balance that?
Yeah, so when I first did the Harbour Club, I spent about a month away from home, traveling the length and breadth of the UK, meeting with training companies, and met 28 companies, but didn't close any deals. So I just felt that it was a complete and utter waste of time. I spent 30 days on the road meeting a load of businesses that just weren't qualified. So what we do now is we usually have a series of 2, maybe 3 meetings on Zoom to procure the deal. And we say very early on that we like to have the whole sort of financial conversation with the business owner. So whilst it's not necessarily just about the numbers, if anything, I think business owners are more concerned with legacy, and you're going to look after their staff and all that sort of stuff. But we sort of say we have that financial conversation early on, so we can give you a ballpark idea as to what we're thinking, how we're going to put a deal together that works for you. And basically just have that conversation, usually on call number 2 or 3. But naturally wouldn't have that conversation until we've got the rapport. Before I came on the Harbour Club, I did 7 deals, but very much a sort of traditional M&A route, where you go and find a business for sale, you go in, you tell the business owner that their business isn't worth what they want, and you hammer them down on the price, and then you use your own money to do the deal. And since I've done the Harbour Club, I've not used any of my own money to do any deals. And I think it's very much about sales and marketing to obviously find your opportunity, but sales is then about building that rapport. And when you've got the rapport, you've got the trust. Ultimately, if you want a business owner to give you their business for a dollar, then they're not going to do that lightly. They've got to trust that you're going to deliver whatever it is that you said you're going to deliver. So, but yeah, we build into those conversations various things depending on how the deal structure is going to be. So, for example, if we were going to use deferred consideration, seller financing, we would tell them in the conversation that we'll do that, and the reasons why we do that, and how it protects goodwill and all that sort of stuff, so that when you actually come to make the offer, it's not a shock. They know that you're not going to put any of your own money into the deal.
Yeah, that was really, that's really good advice. And so, and also Victor was talking a lot about this, the networking side of things, and it is really interesting that you know, the advice I always give to people if they're completely new to this and they haven't you know, done this kind of thing before, is just fill your diary with conversations with people who own the types of businesses you would like to own. Don't worry too much about pitching them a deal. Don't worry too much about whether they're for sale or not for sale, old enough or young enough or whatever it is. Just start having conversations with those business owners, because you'll be amazed. I mean, one of the things that crops up quite often is you'll find one that's young and hungry and wants to stick around, and you'll find one that wants to retire. Well, those two stuck together would work really well. Is there some marriage kind of you can create that you can get some upside in? And yeah, so it's really start having those conversations. You just be amazed what comes up. Like, you know, Victor's saying, it could be your hairdresser, it could be a taxi driver, it could be anybody that you're having a conversation with. You get introduced to somebody and you just, you know, start that conversation. Will Harbour Club members, a question that's come in, thank you for the question. Will Harbour Club members sell UK businesses, financial services, manufacturing, engineering, income generating, real estate, hotels, care homes that can be repurposed, etc., to non-Harbour Club members, however likely to become a member later? So would a Harbour Club member sell a business to a non-Harbour Club member? Of course, yeah. In fact, they're probably unlikely to sell it to a Harbour Club member, because they want to sell it in a more traditional way and get a big upside. So yeah, certainly if you've got, you know, if you're willing to borrow millions of dollars from a bank to buy a business, or you've got tons of cash sitting around to buy a business, then yeah, we cure people ready to sell. The business. So yeah, what they wouldn't do is sell a business for the price they bought it for, or you know, do it the other way around. It's yeah, it just doesn't make sense. This was kind of the quandary I had when I first came up with the idea for the Harbour Club, was that people kept seeing what I was doing. So quite often I'd buy one of their competitors, or I would do something, you know, in the you know, in their industry, and they would want me to then come and work for them. You know, so it would be come and be a non-executive, or come and do some consultancy work for them. And when you drill into it, what they want you to do is to come and take a salary, find businesses for them, and acquire them for no money down, which makes absolutely no sense, because if I go and find a business, I just buy it myself, and it's my upside. So so effectively, yeah, it just didn't make any sense at all. And it was only when I bought a seminar business that I thought, okay, this is a way that I can deal with all these people that keep asking me to come work for them. I can just show them what I do. And there's a bunch of things I hate about the seminar industry. It's full of charlatans. It's full of people who you know, don't have the experience that they claim to have. Most of them are just trying to get you onto a kind of treadmill of charges. So you do like a taster course with them, then there's an upsell, and there's an even bigger upsell, and there's the gold, platinum, mastermind group, or whatever it is. So when we, you know, when I came up with the concept for the Harbour Club, it was very deliberately the anti of that kind of concept. So the only thing you can buy from Harbour Club is Harbour Club membership. There's no upsells or cross-sells or different things. It's just a really, really straightforward thing. You get, there's a pre-course now that you do before attending the 3-day live virtual event. There's 12 weeks of accountability coaching after the course. We have an app where you can dive in and get loads of extra content, ask questions, and do all sorts of stuff, and get help from people. When you sell one of your businesses, do you offer the same creative structures, or do you prefer a straight cash deal? Paul first.
Yeah, I mean, you know, for me, any business that we're involved in is always up for sale. And yeah, you know, if you can sell it for cash, great, but there's many different creative structures that not only you can use to actually do the deal, but you can also use to actually exit from. So, you know, one of the strategies that you talk about, Jeremy, is the sort of offshore loan model, and I've used that a few times to exit from a few companies. So yeah, you know, it's just being as creative as you're prepared to be.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I think people get a bit hung up on this idea of, you know, you've got to have all the cash on day one. I mean, you find this when you're buying from people. Of course, you know, people often come to me and say, "Oh, I found a deal, but it's not really a Harbour Club one. They want all the money up front." And it's kind of like, well, of course they do. Everybody does, you know, like, but there's not enough idiots in the world to actually give it to them. So it's not going to happen. And of course, when you're selling, a lot of people think in the same way. And I think if you don't have some kind of structure, you're sometimes leaving stuff on the table, because, you know, they might have 100 grand of cash, and so they're trying to buy the business for 100 grand of cash. But they can give you that 100 grand, and they could probably have another 150 grand of deferred payment, and they could afford to do both deals. So why would you cut your nose off to, you know, to just have the cash component when there's a load more on the table that you could also have access to? So yeah, I think that's kind of important. Victor, have you done an exit yet? I know you were asking me on WhatsApp the other day about exits. Have you done one?
Yeah. So yeah. So basically, I've done two. First one that is the one I just closed with the Weibo. So really happy with the exit. And basically, you know, there is a what's interesting is the owner buying back the shares was willing to pay, you know, everything up front in cash. But in fact, I was the one to propose something a bit more creative so that I could also increase the total value of the exit with part paid in cash and part paid over 2 years. Also because I was quite happy to still get some money, you know, for every month for the next 2 years. So I think also, like, having everything in cash, as you just said, you can leave things on the table. So it's also good to keep a creative mind when it comes to exit. And for the owner, what he wanted was to have a way to minimize his taxes every year, also, so have it as a cost. And his idea at first was to pay some kind of marketing fee, like a service to my holding company. But the way you know, when I thought about it, I said, the thing is, I'm not going to provide any service. So what could refrain him to say after a year, like, I've not received any service, so I don't want to pay anymore and to stop this agreement. So I was a bit, you know, skeptical about it. So the creative way I found, and I think it's one of the things you mentioned also during the Harbour Club, is we have a holding company together. So I said, okay, I'm going to register the IP, the intellectual property, and I will license your name for the next 2 years. And at the end of the 2 years, then automatically you will get your name back. So that's a way where he could have it as a cost. I can have it as a, you know, without having to do anything. And at the end of the day, I still own something. So I also feel a bit better about it, because I could always use the name otherwise. Yeah. So that's a good way. And the other one was the spa. So basically, I bought a hair salon and a spa together. The spa came, you know, automatically also for $1 because it was losing money. So it was really like a $1, you know, worth of business. And no one wanted to buy the business, but I sold the assets. And in fact, the real value was in the rent deposit, because there are 3 months rent deposited for the rent, and because it was quite, you know, a nice location, you know, the money was interesting. So I sold this exit was I sold all the assets, including the liabilities, because as a spa they were selling a lot of packages, so there were a lot of liability also already inside. So I just did a lump sum, invoice out, try to invoice out everything. So which I did, except the employees, because that's not possible. But we managed to transfer the employees. And then because I stopped, you know, the operation, I was able to pass the lease to the new entity, the other entity, and get my deposit back. So basically, it was really like a 1 week work to transfer everything, sell the asset for, you know, not a lot of money, but the real money was in the 3 months deposit, which was interesting. So that was, you know, going back to one of the principles, which is look at what's worth money in the business, and that was quite interesting.
Yeah, fantastic. And look, there's tons of businesses like that. And I actually, quite early on in the pandemic, I was invited to come and speak to a big group of beauticians and hairdressers. And it really was kind of polarized between those that were furiously trying to figure out ways that they could continue to do business through the pandemic, whether it be, YouTubing makeup kind of lessons and all this kind of stuff, and the ones that were just sitting at home drinking, waiting for it all to finish. So it was a real polarization. And of course, the ones that were sitting at home drinking, waiting for it to finish, are also ideal roll-up candidates, because there's a couple of Harbour clubbers that have gone down that route and acquired, a dozen or more of these spa salon type businesses, because they're basically all free right now. And if you have to set one up from scratch, you can easily invest 100 grand in, a new lease, a refurbishment, all of this kind of stuff. So you're effectively getting quite a lot of set in transaction. And in some cases, landlords are being quite helpful in terms of restructuring. You just mentioned that they were happy to move the lease to the new co because it's probably the only way they can see of actually getting any kind of light at the end of the tunnel. Quite often they can be quite flexible. Lots of countries have COVID recovery loans for those kind of businesses, which are very soft and government backed and all that sort of stuff. I know Singapore has those if you do want to access them, where the company can borrow a little bit. Harder to do if you've restructured, if you've created a new co, but if it's an existing company, they're normally willing to throw a few $100,000 at you, which would basically enable you to remain closed for a period of time, and then you have some marketing budget to reopen and to have a bit of a splash. So there's a lot of.
But if I may, what I understand from this loan, they are backed by governments, but only if you are not able to repay. So
right.
It sounds safe, but when I looked into it, I thought, but in fact, they could still come to me and say, no, but look, you can still pay it, so you repay the loan yourself, and we don't use the government money.
Okay, they're a bit more flexible in some other jurisdictions, but I think in Singapore, I guess the government is the last line of defense. So
exactly.
Because I guess there's a big kind of exodus of foreigners at the moment, isn't there? So I guess the banks would be nervous to lend to EP holders or permanent residents, because if they decide just to leave, they're going to be left holding the baby. So I guess it's more the bank, the government sitting behind the bank and providing the solution. Happy birthday for Tuesday. Thank you very much. It was great. If you've seen the Instagram pictures, they were, it was good laugh. Are SPACs a legitimate strategy or option? So there's a lot of confusion around SPACs. So SPACs have got a lot of attention because of the New York, NASDAQ sort of spree of SPACs. Those NASDAQ SPACs are very different to what a SPAC would be in other countries. In fact, in a lot of countries now, they've got rid of the concept of a SPAC or a cash shell because they feel it's too risky for investors. It's like a dark pool. In the US, they basically put a really high fundraising requirement. So you have to raise 50 million as a minimum. Most of them are 100 million plus. And the reason they do that is they reckon it will cost about, for the 2 years that you have to do a deal, it will cost a couple of million to keep the company listed. So the idea is if you have to return money to the investors, they're going to get most of their money back, 98% if it was 100 million SPAC. The challenge, the problem is the investment banks have figured out a workaround, which means that they can put cash into the SPAC that they take back out again when there's a deal done, and then you have to go and raise the money in the normal capital markets. And so a lot of those New York SPACs aren't really sitting on the cash that they say they're sitting on. They've just got cash sitting there that's been pledged by the investment banks. So basically, when you identify a deal that goes into the SPAC, you still have to go through the process of basically an IPO. And so on that basis, it's probably easier just to do an IPO. If the company is fit to be a public company, why not take it public? And then you don't have any of the legacy shareholders or other crap to deal with. We have some quite interesting direct listing strategies within the Harbour Club. for taking companies public very quickly. One of them is a sort of quasi-SPAC, but it basically uses a loophole in the European Union that allows you to list in a slightly more expedient fashion. So that's quite interesting. And we do a no money down version for Harbour Clubbers as well. So if you want to take a company public and you're in the Harbour Club community, we'll effectively do the whole thing for you, and we just become a shareholder in the list code at the end of it. So yes, SPACs are a strategy, but done in a very particular way, not perhaps in the way that you're reading about in the papers. Long-term payback on vendor finance. How are you securing the deal, or do you keep this at risk with a coupon rate? Yeah, so I mean, obviously we've already discussed that within the deferred payment or vendor finance, you create almost an overvaluation, you know, in that you might have only got 100 grand of cash, but you're getting 250 grand total deal size because of the vendor finance policy. So you can be, you know, for a start, you can be quite bullish adding the vendor finance because it's almost a bit of an overvaluation. But Paul alluded to the loan company model, which is something that we use in the Harbour Club, which is effectively you have a loan company that lends them the money, but it doesn't really, but it lends them the money, and then they're paying back a loan instead of vendor finance. And this is really important. And the loan company is not you, it's a separate entity that's created this loan agreement. And that's important because when people do vendor finance, normally, a bit like Victor was saying, they could get a year in and then decide to just stop paying. And, you know, quite often, because we do relatively small deals, you know, these are deals that are like 200, 300, 400 grand. It's often uneconomical for you to go through the legal recovery process, because if they say, oh, he told me it was black and it's actually a really, really dark blue, you know, if they create some smoke around what the nature of the transaction was, it can be completely vacuous and bullshit. But effectively, you're then into 6 figures of legal fees to try and recover it. Well, if you've only got 6 figures that you can potentially get from winning the case, it's a bit of a, you know, crappy deal. Whereas if they've entered into a loan agreement, which is with a separate entity to the person that's selling them the asset, so you sold them the asset, but the loan agreement is with the loan company, that's much easier to enforce. They can have a legal dispute with you, and that's one thing, but that's then at their expense to sue you, and the loan is just enforceable. It's a loan. Look, we lend you the money. Where's our money? It's a very, very straightforward kind of legal basis. So yeah, that's basically how you protect it. And I mean, if you want to, I think we go into the loan company structure. We certainly go into the loan company structure in my book, Go Do Deals, and we probably go into it in the 21-day email course as well. But if you want to find out any more about any of that stuff, if you just reach out to John, it's Jon at harbourclubevents.com, and we actually have one of the 3-day live events on the Singapore time zone on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. So if you are free Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week, reach out to John. There are options to do the Harbour Club from as little as about £297 a month, I think it is. So you can get membership for very, very little. And you can actually do the first 2 days of the 3-day event. And if you decide it's not for you, you can get your money back. So we literally don't have any stupid hoops you have to jump through. I know normally when you deal with these seminar things, you have to demonstrate you've taken certain actions and things like that. We have absolutely no quibble money back guarantee where you can literally sit through 2/3 of it and then decide to walk away. Obviously, you don't get access to the community and all the other stuff if you choose to do that. But yeah, we don't want people in the community who don't want to be there. So if you don't feel it's for you, we just give you any money that you've given us already back, and it's done, it's finished. There's no nothing else to fear. So just reach out. It's Jon at Harbour, spelled HARBOUR, the British way. So John at harbourclubevents.com, and he can help you with all of those bits and pieces. Is there any strategy where, let's say, an owner wants 1 million for their business, and I know you say don't borrow bank finances, but let's say in this business you had to, so meaning the bank usually requires 25% own money in. can you use same-day bridge loan to cover the 25%, have the seller buy back shares in the company the same day to return the 25% and pay off over a period of time? So you've technically none of your own money. Yeah, I mean, look, one of the big challenges with borrowing money from banks is the personal guarantees that come with it. You have to personally guarantee the money. And effectively, you're borrowing money against an incredibly volatile asset. You know, the analogy I often use is, would you mortgage your house and buy Bitcoin? And actually about half of people say yes, but, but you shouldn't, is my point. It's kind of, you know, you're borrowing money and then you're effectively going into an asset that can go up and down in value by a huge amount in a single day. You know, if you lose 2 key members of staff or 2 key customers, the value of that business can change dramatically in an instant, and you've bet your house. You can still lose your house if it doesn't work out. So that's kind of more important. That's more why we say don't borrow the money. But yeah, absolutely, there are ways of turning, you know, if you already have a business, for example, you often don't have to put any of your own money in. You use one business to buy another. So you can pick up one business on a no money down deal that's maybe a bit smaller, and then effectively go and buy a bigger one using some debt. The structure that you describe is very much what private equity companies do, which is where they agree to buy 100% from the owner, but on the basis that the owner then takes a 20-25% stake in the new holding company with some of the proceeds that they receive from the purchase. The idea being, look, we want you to participate in the ride going forwards. We want you to go and share some of the upside. But really, all they're doing is they're getting some of that money back in to finance the bit and wants to see them putting in. So it's a great way of dressing up, getting them to participate. But Paul, I know you've done a few leverage buyouts. What would your comments be on that kind of?
Yeah, so I think one of the next comments is actually somebody said, great to see the caravan company you and Paul acquired. That was actually a leverage buyout originally. We borrowed against the property, so we didn't put any of our own money in. We borrowed against a property which was worth about 2.5 million. We borrowed 1.4 from the bank, no PGs, interest only, and that was used as a down payment to do the deal, and then there was some seller finance for the rest. It was fairly low risk because it was secured against a property with over 1 million of additional equity in it, and then obviously we exited that then into MBH about 9-10 months later. But I think what we sort of are saying to business owners is, you know, banks aren't lending at the moment with the pandemic. Banks are only really interested in providing these coronavirus loans. So financing people like me to go and buy a business just really isn't happening. So we're having to replace that bank funding with you as the seller. So you become the bank, Mr. Seller. And it's quite a good way of positioning the whole sort of vendor finance piece. They want an exit. This gives them their exit. This gives them the money. But you know, the business then isn't stressed with any, you know, bank funding. It's purely, you know, the future cash flows of the business to pay them off. I think you used that, didn't you, Jeremy, in like 2008 with the financial crisis. So, you know, banks weren't lending then, and they're still not lending now. I mean, the reality is you know, if you've got a bit of a track record, you can get leverage finance. It's fairly straightforward in both Australia and the UK, where I've done those types of deals.
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake most people do is they look at the balance sheet and they try and figure out how much money they can borrow against it, and then they just throw that at the previous owner. And you know, that A means you're over leveraged. B, you know, your star employees leaving with all your future cash flow effectively. So you know, if you are going to use some leverage, it should be a bit of the deal. So don't you know, if you can raise $1 million against it, give them 200 grand. And figure out, you know, the 800 through deferred payment and earn out and other mechanisms, because then at least you're keeping, you know, the risk within a fairly tolerable level. Victor, have you done any LBOs or not?
Yeah, I did one with a jewelry company. So basically, the way was not purely LBO, but it's an asset kind company, you know, with gemstones. So the way I did it was I bought the gemstone on a lower valuation, and then I lent the gemstone to the company, and they were paying me back basically my investment through the real cost price of the gemstones. So that was a bit of a mechanism that helped me acquire the company with like advancing some money, but financing most of it through this kind of loan, but from the company and not from an outside party.
Fantastic. Yeah. So kind of providing the inventory finance effectively. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was interesting also because in Singapore there is no tax on loans, so it was a very efficient way.
Nice way to do it. Yeah, and then there's a guy in the Rolodex in the Harbour Club who does really creative financing solutions and can do stuff in Australia and the US and all over. And one of the ones that we've used him for a few times is purchase order finance. And a lot of people don't realise that such a thing exists. They know that you've got debtor finance and that you can borrow money against all sorts of assets. But if you have a company that, for example, gets a big purchase order from someone. So for example, the one that we had was a company that was doing about 2 million a year, and they got a 1.6 million purchase order from the HSE, which is the Irish Health Ministry, we want to call it, the equivalent of the NHS in Ireland. And basically they didn't know what to do because you can't factor a purchase order. You can only factor the invoice once you've delivered. And of course, they've got this purchase order. They have to buy all the product from, in this case, it was buying it from China, shipping it to Europe. It all has to be repackaged and prepared, and then it can be sold to Ireland. And that's the point where you raise the invoice where you could potentially factor it. But with purchase order finance, you literally finance the purchase order. And in this case, we were able to get 100% financing on the purchase order. So this had a huge margin in it. It was about a 50% margin. And so straight away, they had the 800 grand profit pretty much up front from the transaction, which can then be used to acquire the company, so, or a big stake in the company. So yeah, it's a really interesting solution, particularly for people that have big orders from big companies, which can sometimes seem like a threat, but is actually an opportunity. So somebody asking, is all the good stuff reserved for the third day? No, actually, the third day is probably a little bit lighter because you get so pummeled in day 1 and 2. We kind of try and take it easy on you. So in the third day, we cover all the wealth stuff. We do financial engineering, which is really good because that's how to add tons of value and create lots of shareholder value. And I think we finish off legals in the morning, which there is some good stuff in as well. But actually all of the key stuff, so how you source the deals, how you hold the meetings, how you construct the legal contracts, how you, all the deal structures, the 15 deal structures, all of that stuff is all in days 1 and 2. And then we also have lots of live case studies as well with people walking through their own deals. And the lessons that they learned from them and how they put them together. And there's lots of live Q&A with me and with those other delegates. So yeah, no, you get exposure to an awful lot of it. Literally, we're a community. It's not a training course. You don't learn how to buy and sell companies from doing a training course on buying and selling companies. You learn how to buy and sell companies by going out and buying and selling some companies. And so the course is just the knowledge part. It's the application where all learning is going to come, and that application of the knowledge is much easier when you're in the community because you can ask questions, you can partner up with people if you feel that your skills are deficient in certain areas. Yeah, you've got that kind of support around you. So just the information on its own, it's kind of like just sitting down and reading 20 books about playing tennis. You're not necessarily going to immediately be able to pick up a racket and play a competitive game. You need to actually go and spend some time on the court as well. So no, I think you'll be impressed. Well, there's a couple of questions in the question section actually. Let me just have a look at these. Just curious how many members there are in the Harbour Club worldwide. So yeah, active in the app, there's about 1,500 people at the moment. So that's across yeah, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore. We have a few people in some of the kind of other Southeast Asian countries as well. Then a big rump of people in Europe and the UK, and then USA and Canada. So and a small growing group in South Africa. So yeah, I mean, one of the great things is like Paul doing deals in Australia, he's able to find local partners very quickly and easily when he identifies a target down there. Victor, have you gone offshore at all, or you just stick to the little red dot?
So one of the companies that I have has also entities in Thailand, China, Malaysia. But since the beginning of the pandemic, not able to travel, it changed a bit my vision of Singapore. Before, I always thought like a good business should be in Southeast Asia, should be like regional businesses. And then, I realized, look, this is an interesting market. It's quite easy to manage a few companies because it's, it's a city, so very easy to go from one place to another. There are a lot of opportunities, a very good taxation when it comes to capital gain. So, I've changed a bit my view of Singapore. Now I'm focusing only in Singapore, and I could see also a lot of effects, like the fact that I'm spending more time talking to people here, then there is more deals also that comes to me. All these kind of things are really helping me doing more and more at the moment.
Yeah, fantastic.
And as I mentioned to you, my last acquisition was a logistic company, a last mile delivery in Singapore. Business is booming because everybody is ordering more and more online, especially now with the second kind of semi-lockdown that we have. So that's the company I'm also trying to sell. We are developing it, we are increasing the margin, every day. And it's just like, this is where I was, as texting you, like, okay, do you have any idea of what we can do? So I got 2 people from the Harbour Club that also mentioned, I can try to say it. So if there is anyone also here that is willing to help me sell this business, they can reach out to me, and I will be happy to share the profits also.
There we go. That's a good deal. So it's a last mile logistics business. If anybody knows any buyers or that wants to help sell that, that would be great. And Paul, what would you say about doing deals cross border and finding partners and stuff like that? Have you had all good experiences, some bad experiences? What have you learned doing that?
I think the Harbour Club community is great for that, and I think probably 70% of the deals that I do now are created through joint ventures, people from the network. So I did my first deal in Australia last autumn, and I worked with somebody that I met through the Harbour Club, Aaron, who's based in Melbourne. So he's on the ground and understands the sort of local, legals and tax structures and all that sort of stuff. And I'm working with a couple of lawyers that I've met through, again, the Harbour Club based in Australia, which just makes doing deals, a lot easier, having people on the ground that sort of understand the landscape. And I'm doing deals in the US, again, built out the same. I'm working with some Harbour Club guys that are based in Florida. We've got a tax guy there that understands sort of all the different sort of stuff. So it's fairly straightforward.
Yeah, cool. So Peter's just asking, how do you go about sourcing in Hong Kong, Vietnam, and US? So US is really straightforward. Lots of public record stuff, lots of tons of businesses. So it's very, very easy sourcing in the US. Hong Kong is a little bit trickier, lots of very small businesses and lots of very big ones, so the mid-market is a little bit squeezed, but there are opportunities there. We've looked at several deals in Hong Kong. Again, the sourcing is relatively straightforward. Vietnam, you're not allowed to own anything, so that's always a challenge. There's very strict foreign ownership rules. There are certain businesses that fall within the things that can be owned by foreigners, the wholly owned foreign entities or WAFI type structures, but yeah, it's definitely a bit trickier.
And then it's difficult to get the money out.
Yeah, capital controls and stuff. Yeah, which is the problem in China and the problem in India and as well. Do any of your members use royalty financing? We are aware of royalty financing. It's relatively expensive, but again, they often lend where perhaps a bank wouldn't lend, so it's interesting. But I don't know of anyone in the community that's actively using it. I know we had a discussion about it in the community recently, but I haven't heard of any deals that have closed using that particular form of financing. We're a software SaaS and are looking to acquire other software SaaS companies. We find that many of the smaller ones are looking for unreasonable multiples when they're sub 1 million. but they see these multiples on TechCrunch. How do we work with unsophisticated small business owners? Look, there are loads of really good examples of SaaS roll-up type companies. Probably the most famous is Constellation, who I think did something like 86 acquisitions last year. So they're they're absolutely storming. And look, there are opportunities out there. There are lots of businesses. In fact, quite often there are SaaS businesses hiding within conventional businesses where they've generated a software solution that they're offering to their clients, and it's it's just a bit of their business and not their entire business. But yeah, I mean, basically, look, they're basing this massive multiple on their future earnings. So the normal way that you would deal with that is to tie any additional money they're going to get to their future earnings. So building an earn-out structure and getting them to work with you to help grow the business. So effectively they grow into the valuation that that they're trying to achieve. But yeah, I mean, when you get into that kind of 20, 30 times revenue, of course, it's just not going to work. But they will find that out. You can put your best foot forward and put your offer on the table. And then just keep out there and keep looking. Plenty more fish in the sea, as they say, and just see what you can get away with. Have you come across that at all, Victor? Crazy multiples.
So that's why usually when I talk to people about sourcing deals and explain what I'm looking for, I always say that I don't do tech because of this reason. Even without tech, usually they will come with multiples that are quite high, 5 to 8 times for small businesses. On tech, usually they are above 15 times when during the first meeting. However, what I see is, it's good to come with the best offer and then just leave it there, because it's just a question also of education. Usually they will start with quite a high number in mind. They will go around, and then when they notice, after 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, that in fact nobody will offer them a better deal. I got 2 of those deals, that I had no contact whatsoever for 4 months, and then he contacted me again and said, "Yeah, can we meet again?" And I have another one I'm working on right now, which is exactly the same case. So I guess it's a buyer's market. They just need to to digest the fact that they won't get the money or they cannot get the money that they are dreaming of. And then maybe it's possible to do a good deal.
Yeah. Paul, crazy multiples. Any good war stories?
Yeah, I mean, you see it all the time, but I think it goes with just, having that financial conversation early on. Yes, you need the rapport, but what's the point of having, 7 or 8 meetings with somebody that never have realistic expectations? And at the end of the day, you can only work with what you can work with. So, I mean, I actually had a call yesterday from a training business. I offered them a deal, I think it was December last year. And he wanted I think it was like 7 or 8 times multiple, and we'd offered him 3. And I got a call off him yesterday to say, "Are we still interested to talk? I've just won another contract." And he's probably coming more to the realization that his business isn't worth 8 times. We can do 3. So, sometimes you just have to let them come to that realization. Because generally speaking, companies aren't valued at 20 to 30 times multiple unless they're a mega public company. So
yeah. So somebody here saying, sorry, repeat the sources for US and Hong Kong. So look, any of the normal sourcing techniques work in the US and Hong Kong. You can reach out to John at Harbour Club events. He can share some stuff with you, or my book, Go Do Deals, goes into some sourcing. The 21-day email course that we provide goes into some sourcing stuff. So yeah, reach out and they can do that. Within the Harbour Club community itself, we have geographically specific sourcing guides for quite a few places. We don't have Hong Kong, but we do have the US, Australia, things like that. So yeah, so just specific techniques that work in those jurisdictions, or hacks that people have found that are particularly useful in those jurisdictions, or in those guides. Do you look at turning companies into cooperatives? If so, do you have an exit strategy from a cooperative? No, I've never turned a company into a cooperative. The closest we've done is creating limited liability partnerships, so LLPs, as a sort of a method of engaging the employees. So you effectively make them partners. But what we often do is keep that separate, and it has an interrelationship with the limited company. And I tend to only do that in the UK because there are some specific advantages cash flow wise to doing that in the UK that don't work with the LLP structure in Australia, for example, and in Singapore, where LLPs do exist, doesn't carry those same cash flow advantages. So yeah, I've never done anything in a cooperative space. One of the case studies we use on the Harbour Club is around social enterprise and not-for-profit, but yeah, nothing in the cooperative space. What is the discerning difference between 2 times and 3 times multiples and larger ones, excluding tech, seeking automation, owned and not required? Yeah, so look, the biggest driver for an increase in multiple is normally a reduction in risk. So it's like security of cash flow. So when you reduce risk, the multiple tends to go up. And one of the biggest drivers for reducing risk is scale. Big companies trade at much higher multiples than small companies do. So it can be exactly the same industry and the multiple will go up as the size of the company goes up, because the risk of it failing reduces. It becomes less dependent on a certain number of customers or a certain number of staff. A really good one for this is if you go to Google and just type bizbuysell.com report, and you'll find they do. BizBuySell is like a businesses for sale website. Please don't use it for sourcing, but the report that they publish is really good and basically gives you multiples by industry for companies sub 1 million and over 1 million. So it tends to be the SME, small business sort of space. And you'll be pretty shocked by what these businesses are selling for. It's quite US centric, but still it gives you a reasonable idea. Like a small engineering company will get 1.6 times earnings. So it's you're not talking about retirement numbers here. This is what real businesses are actually selling for, and sometimes that can be quite a good tool to share with with potential vendors. Just show them the report, and then when they finish crying, you can have a conversation about the deal that you're going to do. So yeah, BizBuySell, biz B-U-Y as in buy, and then sell, S-E-L-L, BizBuySell. How do you define financial engineering for Harbour Club's types of deals? The word has a different meaning in some contexts. Yeah, so financial engineering is a word we've hijacked and used. It is a Harbour Club expression because financial engineering technically is about quantitative analysis, so nothing to do with what we do. Financial engineering for us is how we play around with balance sheet, the profit and loss, and the cash flow of a business, because quite often small businesses are run in a very inefficient way when it comes to presentation of profit and creation of cash. And so we have a bunch of techniques that we apply to small businesses to increase their cash flow, increase their profit, and beef up their balance sheet. And yeah, we refer to it as financial engineering. But yeah, basically it's how to, when you buy a business that's screwed, it's how do you make it, how do you unscrew it relatively quickly. So it's yeah, adding lots of shareholder value. So cool. Well, we are coming up to the hour. So we'll just do the last question here, I think, and draw a line under it. How do you scrutinize owner add backs in sales? So you've been talking to brokers, haven't you, Gary? So owner add backs are what brokers use to manipulate the profit. In most jurisdictions, it's referred to as accounting fraud. But when brokers do it, it seems to be fine, which is basically taking all the things that they spent last year that they wish they hadn't spent and trying to add them back to the profit. The numbers that they've presented to the regulator, to the tax authorities in the country that they operate in, are their numbers. If they're going to try and argue that they're not their numbers, then they're committing tax fraud. So it's very simple, but those are the numbers. But what brokers like to do is brokers make money by charging a listing fee to the company. So you pay a fee to list your business for sale. And it can be anything from a couple of $1,000s up to like $50,000 to list your company for sale. And then they have another department in the broker that actually goes out and tries to sell the businesses. And so it's selling the listings, it's getting those $2,000 hits that keep the lights on, keep the secretaries employed, and keep the the office working. And so quite often they will overpromise what the person can sell their business for in order to get the listing, in order to keep the lights on. So you often find there are these horribly overvalued businesses in the in these brokers for sale. And one of the tricks that they do is they take the accounts, which might show 100 grand of profit. They take all the things they wish they hadn't spent last year and they add those back, which takes the 100 grand to $1 million of profit. And then they multiply it by like 8 or 10 times, which is like, private equity kind of valuations. And as Paul mentioned, private equity don't get out of bed for, 50 to 100 million sort of transactions, but they apply these to very small businesses. And so then all of a sudden you've got a 10 million valuation for a business that's doing 100 grand a year of profit. And it's clearly completely nonsense and unsustainable, but they got their listing fee, so they keep the lights on for another month, right? So, and then that business will stay with that broker for 2 to 3 years. The poor business owner's already been to the Mercedes garage and picked out the color of the leather they want in the new car, and they've been looking at summer homes for sale, and yeah, they'll spend the next 2 to 3 years being incredibly frustrated by the fact they aren't able to realize this crazy thing. Yeah, ask for actuals, get their tax submissions. Every company has to submit a tax submission at the end of the year in Australia to ASIC or to Singapore tax authorities or the HMRC in the UK or wherever it is. Get the tax return, because if their best argument is that they lied in their tax return, it's a pretty weak one. So, yeah, Paul, have you got anything you'd add to that in terms of owner add backs or manipulating?
Yeah, so I've done quite a few deals, and I've never successfully been able to do a deal that's come from a broker. I think you always see on that information memorandum adjusted EBIT, but when you go and look the company up on Company's House or somewhere, you sort of see like 100 grand profit, but the adjusted EBIT is 10 million, and it's just never going to work for all the reasons that you've said. So I just tend to source most of my deals direct, and then most business owners that aren't necessarily for sale, you have got to have that whole conversation about what their adjusted EBIT is.
Yeah, good point. Victor, have you come across this? Have you done a deal with a broker?
I've done one coming from a broker.
Yeah.
And I think like one of the other things also I'm always skeptical about brokers is they bring some kind of credibility to the deal, but in fact they don't, because they don't look at all into the detail of is this a good company or not, or really like dig like is there anything I should warn the future buyer and so on. So I find it very risky, because it's as if like, wow, I got this great company to sell, but you are taking all the risk if you want to buy it. I don't think your money, because in fact, very, very. So of course, if you go to the big names, they would, but it's not the same category. So in the mid market, very rarely they would have really done a due diligence. So, but you would assume they had, So that's why I would prefer not to go through brokers, and also I find it very complicated. But I did one with a broker. Again, that was, I guess a company that he didn't know how to sell. And basically he let me do all the discussion directly with the owner. So the broker was not involved anymore. The moment he was not in the room anymore, this is where things started to get somewhere, and we're able to find a deal after a few meetings. But I agree with Paul, like having a broker in the discussion, really difficult to arrive at.
It's a third person in a marriage. It's a bit unnecessary. It's like it doesn't really work. So yeah, we've got some good case studies inside the Harbour Club community of people that have done deals with brokers, but I think it's the exception, not the rule. And so it's much better, you can make yourself a really busy fool chasing all of those deals, because it seems like, well, they've got all the deals, I just need to figure out how to get them, and it's you can waste an awful lot of time peeing around with them. So Jack is asking about, he's in Australia wanting to do deals in America. Yeah, you absolutely can. And look, the great thing with the Harbour Club is you can find those partners in all of those different jurisdictions. I would say you can equally do deals in Australia. So, I mean, one of the reasons why you might do a deal in America is if you had some ambition to perhaps live there or move there. You know, when you own a business there, it's very easy to then get visas and things like that. So, you know, that can be a good reason. Or just from an opportunistic perspective, you know, that you find more opportunity there. But there's tons of opportunity in Australia, so I wouldn't be put off by that at all. You have the baby boomer problem that Paul was alluding to. Agribusiness is doing really well in Australia. Do you have any appetite for agribusiness? I'm sector agnostic. I'd look at anything, but quite often when people say it's going really well, that means there's lots of competition. I'm actually quite contrarian. I like businesses where there's not lots of competition. The simple, boring businesses where no one else is there looking to buy them or get involved. So quite often, yeah. Difference between a finder and a broker. Well, a broker is, you know, an appointed representative to sell the business. I mean, some Harbour clubbers do. So the Harbour club community quite often splits up into kind of 3 roles. One is the scout, so people going looking for deals. One is a closer who closes the deals, and then one is the operator who goes in and works in the business. And quite often some people do 1 or 2 of those roles, and sometimes they split it up into 3 or whatever. But that generally seems to be how the joint venture arrangements kind of fall into place. Now, brokers in Australia typically have a real estate license, no real knowledge or experience running businesses. Yeah, I mean, that's typical everywhere in the world. There's no barrier to qualification to sell businesses. It's the kind of new used car salesperson of the world. Is there any value in a company that's digitally ready for remote working? Look, I mean, everybody's had to make that shift, I think. You know, all businesses now have to have that element of remote working to them. Again, every business is an opportunity. As we've already discussed on this call, sometimes you've got the ones that are an opportunity because they will bounce back, like the spas and the salons that have got absolutely decimated by the pandemic. But you know, it's also, those are great recession-proof businesses that do very well in down times as well as up times. And then you've got the ones that are already bucking the trend. So like the caravan company was already mentioned. Well, people aren't going on foreign holidays or cruise ships, and so the caravan industry is absolutely, motorhomes or RVs or whatever you want to call them, are absolutely booming at the moment. So yeah, there's just generally a kind of shift in people's appetites for things. Anyway, I promised Victor and Paul we would do an hour, and we're an hour and 8 minutes into our hour. So I will let them go. Palm's just asking if you can pay a broker a finder's fee. I wouldn't, no. Under most legal jurisdictions, including Australia, if you're a broker, you have to act for one side. You're not allowed to act for 2 sides. So you can either be on the sell side or the buy side. You're not allowed to act on both. So they can't represent the client that's for sale and take a fee from you to find inside information. It would have to be a separate activity. And you can just go and do this yourself. You can just go and do all the sourcing yourself. It's much, much easier. Yeah, that's kind of it. Happy belated birthday. Thank you very much. And hey, look, anybody wants to follow up any more, do reach out to john@harbourclubevents.com. We've got an event Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, if you fancy doing one on the Singapore time zone, which works quite well for Australia as well. Like I say, you can do 2/3 of it without any commitment. Well, you have initial commitment, but you'll get it back if you disagree with anything. Yes, we have recorded this, so we'll share the recording with the people that had subscribed to join the webinar. And yeah, any questions, do feel free to reach out to the team and connect. And Paul and Victor, thank you so much for spending the time to go through this with everyone. And yeah, we'll see you both very soon, I'm sure, once we're all allowed to travel around again. So,
it's a pleasure.
Right. Have fun, everyone. Thank you very much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.